Welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod. I couldn't say Dr. Grampuchet's name earlier. Now I can't say my own name. I'm distracted by that cord hanging, so now I've gotten rid of it. All right.
Hi, how are you?
Things that bother us, right? I guess I'm a little bit obsessive compulsive today. So how's that? How are you?
I'm doing good.
Yeah?
Good, yeah.
And we've got a lot that's going to happen on today's show. We've got our fabulous guest, Vince Redmond, who's going to be here with us. We're going to talk about two different things with Vince about back to school, because I can feel everybody's anxiety. My own, you could bounce a quarter off my head.
Mine is up more this year than it's ever been, and I don't know why.
Me too. I'm a little bit of a mess. Well, Dr. Grampuchet just said something, and she said that obsessions come from not from feeling like you can't be in control.
Right, and I don't feel in control at all.
Well, let's face it, there's a lot of things going on in the world that we don't feel like we're in control right now, right? So that, and it all kind of plays into it. So yes, we're going to talk with Vince about back to school, but we're also going to talk about not getting in our kids' way.
Okay.
Something that I feel that I'm incredibly guilty of, that there are times when I, smother instead of mother. And, right? Yes. So, and which kind of leads into the first thing that I want to talk about. There's a lot of things that are happening in the entertainment world. We're seeing a lot more autism
a lot of autism being represented. Yeah.
Yes. And I got to go on Thursday night to a special screening at Netflix, and it was for the first episode of the show Atypical. And man, I loved it.
You did?
I absolutely, hands down, want to say that I loved it.
Okay.
And we are, on the 31st of this month, we are going to have one of the actors on the show. He's one of the actors that's on the spectrum, playing somebody who's on the spectrum. He has a recurring character. He doesn't come in until, I believe, episode 6, but he's going to be here on the show with us. I think his name is David Jacques. And so he's going to be here with us, and that's going to be really wonderful. We also are going to have on the show the person who created the show, the writer, and maybe some of the producers of the show to talk about the show, because I loved it that much.
What did you love about it? Tell us what you loved about it.
Okay, first of all, I think I come from a different point of view than a lot of people, because I used to teach theater, and one of the things that I had to teach was how to write a review of something. And I firmly believe that when you write a review of something, because this is the way you write a review, the accepted way of writing a review is you judge what it is, not what it isn't, right? So, there have been lots of people, there's been criticism. People are like, why is the main character never a girl that's on the spectrum? Well, write that show. Would somebody please go write that show? But, we were talking before, can I say one of the things that you said?
Yeah.
Or you can say it. What did you say?
Well, all of these characters are so highly functioning. I mean, you've got a surgeon, you've got a kid in high school who's even thinking about dating. My son doesn't even have that on his wavelength.
Right.
And I wanted to, when we're going to see some kids that are portrayed that are not savants and or super intelligent and super high functioning.
And you were saying that as part of a discussion, which I think that's an important discussion to have, but not as a review of Atypical.
No.
And because I think it's really important, but there have been reviews written of Atypical that really, they're like, why isn't this and why isn't it that? And because it's not, because it's a show about a family.
Right.
And it so happens that one of the characters in the family is a young man who is in high school, who is high functioning. And it so happens that in this particular story, there are certain things that he has more phobias about and concerns about and obsessions about. He's obsessed with penguins. That is not every person. If we're arguing that no two people on the spectrum are exactly alike, then we can't have expectations that he should be obsessed about this but not be obsessed about
and
that.
And that he can represent the full range of the spectrum.
Thank you. That can't happen. So I walked in knowing that I was going to see a family with somebody on the spectrum, that I was not going to be seeing my son, that I was not going to be seeing me on the screen. Because the type of autism mom that she was, while I related to a lot of things, she's not me, nor should she be, right?
Right.
But you have to be willing to suspend your disbelief to hear the story, and in the story, see how you feel and see what you learn. This is how I sat down to watch Atypical, and I saw a story that moved me to tears, that made me laugh, that caused me to look at myself in a different way, that caused me to look at the world in a different way, that caused me to look at my son in a different way, and that more than anything else, see, and I'm getting emotional, it opened a door for me that I didn't know I'd been missing.
Which is what door?
It gave me, I am assuming, because I don't have a neurotypical kid, but I'm assuming for neurotypical parents, when they're talking about things their whole life with their kids, and they're saying, we feel like this. Oh, well, that's like Elsa in Frozen, or, oh, it's like this person. And I hear my neurotypical nieces and nephews talking about, how in this movie, when this person does that, it kind of feels like that. And they have all these reference points, right? Well, I didn't have anything other than parenthood, and parenthood was my thing that I would point to from time to time, but I didn't have anything where I could really sit down, watch it with my son, and later on have a conversation about uncomfortable things having to do with sex, and how things could go wrong, and how you can feel things, and in the moment how somebody can take something wrong. And this gave me, I sat and watched it with Jem. Jim and Jem were with me. We watched it all together, and we all walked out with different things. But the thing that I said to the writer immediately afterwards was, thank you for the gift of being able to have a platform from which I can have a conversation with my son that isn't about him, because it's so much easier to talk about it when it's not about them. If you have to talk about sex and they're talking about them, everybody's got these feelings. But when we're talking about a character in a show, it removes it enough that you can have a dispassionate I didn't realize before Thursday that I didn't have that, and that I was missing it. And as soon as it was happening, and I was sitting with my son, and there was a moment there, you go from laughing to crying very quickly.
Right.
And as somebody that I love who's on the autism spectrum, and I talked to him right after, and I said, what did you think? And he said, gosh, there were times I was really uncomfortable. And he said, but of course, sometimes it's important to be uncomfortable to grow. And I thought, oh yeah, doesn't that just describe it? Yeah, there were things that I went, oh man, I'm feeling a lot of things right now. Anyway, it's gotten a fair amount of flack.
It has, because it's gotten flack for not having an actor with autism play the lead character, and not having more consultants on the show and creators.
I don't want to take those two things separately. I appreciate, and let me start by saying that I will fight to the death for our autism community, and I mean everybody in the autism community, but most especially people who are on the autism spectrum, to have the ability to voice their opinions. I will fight to the death for that. Everybody gets to have their opinion. Of course, folks who are on the autism spectrum can and should be able to voice an opinion about anything, including how a character is portrayed that is on the autism spectrum. What concerns me, and by the way, they auditioned people who are on the spectrum to play the lead role. Ultimately, they did give the role to somebody who's not on the spectrum because they felt he was doing the best portrayal. And I think you got to do that. They did see somebody who was on the spectrum who was such an amazing actor that they wrote a character for him. He's the young man who's going to be on the show in a couple of weeks. And he's now a recurring character on the show. So I want people to know that they reached out to the community, made the attempt, but ultimately gave the role to the best person. And I want to say how important that is. Because if we ever get to the point where we say only a person who's on the spectrum can play a person who's on the spectrum, then we are also implying that a person who's on the spectrum can't play somebody who's not on the spectrum. And that I disagree with. There were huge headlines this week. A very dear friend of mine who's been on the show before, Glenn Cassell, who's a Broadway director, he was the one who just recently directed Hunchback of Notre Dame and cast a deaf actor for the first time to play the Hunchback. And we were like, man, that's awesome. Because he's written as somebody who has,
who has hearing.
Maybe has hearing, but not necessarily.
Right.
Never been played before by a deaf actor. And Glenn said, I love this actor, and this actor is bringing something to this portrayal that's amazing, right? Well, Glenn is directing Little Mermaid that's out touring right now, and he cast as Ariel an actress who happens to be Asian American. And in the South, they're pushing back and going, well, we just can't get past the fact that she's Asian. What?
Yeah, really.
Like really, we don't want to live in a society where we say only these people can play these roles.
Right.
So I just want to caution our autism community, while I agree with you, we want to have opportunities for actors who are on the spectrum to play all kinds of roles. Mm-hmm. Let's be really careful that we don't say only an actor who's on the spectrum can play an actor on the spectrum.
Right.
I think we need to be cautious about that.
I mean, from time immemorial, we've had non-sighted people playing blind people, all kinds of people with disabilities that are portrayed by actors that don't have disabilities.
And the actors,
this is what Academy Awards are made of a lot of times.
And actors who count themselves as having disabilities say, but there are so few roles, please let us have a chance.
Yeah.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But the role has to go to whoever is going to play it in the way that the director wants to play it. And I think, but we have to have the access to auditions more for people who have disabilities.
And you think Keir Gilchrist did a marvelous job?
I think he was lovely.
Okay.
I think that he was absolutely lovely. I think
and
that
the parents, we've got Jennifer Jason Leigh as the mother.
Yes.
Right? And one of the criticisms in the New York Times was that the father was too cookie cutter.
My husband didn't feel that way, and there is I don't know how, okay, so here's the thing that I have a trouble with, is that on the one hand, we've got people complaining and saying, well, you didn't hire somebody who was on the spectrum. They did research upon research upon research, and they did have a consultant who works with individuals who's on the autism spectrum to make sure that the therapist was responding in a certain different way. And people are saying, yeah, but you didn't hire somebody who's on the spectrum to be a consultant. And I agree that that's a thing that should be, right? I tell you, watching the show, I don't think it suffered. People disagree with me, that's fine. But then you have people, so we're arguing that, well, you can't actually tell a story about somebody who's on the spectrum unless you have somebody on the spectrum there to consult with. I don't know about that, because I go to Tennessee Williams, and Tennessee Williams wrote for women in a way that is absolutely brilliant. He's not a woman. And if I were to say only women can write for women, it limits us. I think we have to be careful. I agree. I want a consultant on these sets. I do, but I don't think we should limit ourselves to that. But, the other part of it is that then there was a person who was on the spectrum that I greatly respect and admire, who was saying, you should have hired an actor that was on the spectrum, and you should have had a consultant on the thing. And by the way, the mom wasn't believable because autism moms don't do this. And I was like, I'm sorry. How can these things both be true? Because you're not an autism mom. So how?
Right.
So how can you sit there and tell me I can't know? How to ideally look and see that the character is being portrayed correctly for a person on the spectrum, but you can tell me if the autism mom was being. I don't think those things are compatible.
And we're going to be hearing a lot more, because there's more than Atypical.
Yes.
That's on the air. There is The Good Doctor, which
Yes.
is coming out about the surgeon with autism.
Yes.
And then we have the show Claws has a character in it. I guess one of the lead actresses has a brother with autism that she supports.
They've just finished their first season.
Right.
And so that wasn't very talked about, Claus.
No, it wasn't.
We're seeing more and more of these characters. Of course, we just had The Accountant with Ben Affleck. And I think here's the takeaway. None of us are going to be thrilled with every single moment of every single portrayal, because it's a huge spectrum. And I think that it's important, though, that these stories are being told.
Yes. There's a presence now, and it's reflecting the growing presence in our society itself.
It absolutely is, and I think it's important that these stories get told in a way that's positive. And some of the criticism from Atypical, where people were saying, people on the spectrum were saying, I don't want the world to look at autism this way. I urged everybody to go back and watch the show, because a lot of people were saying that without having seen the show.
Right.
I did not see that. I don't know how anyone could walk away from that show and think anything other than huge, mad respect and love for this character. He's adorable, and you want him to succeed. Mm-hmm. You want him to do well. You get to be inside his head, so you understand why he does something that's taken wrong. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to do a lot for the dating scene for people who are on the autism spectrum, for them to be understood, actually.
Let's hope so.
Yeah,
let's hope so. Now, in addition to lots going on in the TV and film world, there's other things in the news.
Yeah.
The ACE Autism Grants decision over which entities get the grants has stirred a lot of anxiety among scientists.
Yeah, the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, started these grants in 2007. And these have been the lion's share of what has been done for autism research. And
each award supplies up to $1.5 million per year for 5 years. It's a huge grant.
It is a huge grant, and it's in danger. And I think it's something that we all need to be monitoring and taking a look at. Right now, if you go to spectrumnews.org, they've got an amazing article from which we're referring, mm-hmm. which is Decision Over ACE Autism Grant Stirs Anxiety Among Scientists.
Right.
This is a place where we all need to be a little bit more aware and be paying attention, because we don't know if these grants are going to be continued, and we need our voices to be heard.
A lot of important work has come out of these grants.
Absolutely. And then, not to end on a bad note, but did you see this video? And I just added this morning. Over the weekend, video came out of 2 kindergarten teachers in Ohio, in Crestline, Ohio, dragging this happened in May, dragging one of their students, a little boy named Corbin Kemmel, mm-hmm. Who apparently, according to these teachers, they were on the playground and he was behaving in a way that was not acceptable. They have alleged that he hit one of them in the eye, but mm-hmm. there's no camera footage of that, but there is camera footage of these 2 women dragging him through the hallway.
Right.
And at one point, dragging him by the foot with his face on the ground, floor.
Right. And no criminal charges will be filed against these teachers.
That's sort of the catalyst that brought this videotape to the forefront, that on the 9th of August, they decided that no criminal charges. They have been on paid academic leave since this happened. The mom said that she was initially told that something had happened the first day, I believe. Right. And then she was called back in 2 days later and was told more about what was happening. And to their credit, the police released the tape and allowed her to watch the tape. Mm-hmm. And if you watch the tape, I don't think there's I don't think there's anybody out there that could watch the tape and not have your stomach just turn over.
Right.
And think, I'll be honest with you, the first thing that I thought was how amazing it is that they let the mom see the tape, because I think that's extraordinary, and I don't think that happens in most cases.
Right.
How amazing it was that there was footage mm-hmm. of it, because mm-hmm. a lot of schools don't have cameras, and the fact that the police shared it with the mom. Mm-hmm. I just want to give them kudos, because she had a right to see it. And she said, I just wanted to cry and hug him, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to cry and hug this little boy. And you know what I always say is, these people aren't trained. These people aren't trained, and that we need to train people.
It says, should they be allowed to return to their chosen career paths, because they're on leave now. they'll have to undergo extensive counseling and training.
Well, according to the school district, both of these women were trained in how to de-escalate violence and how to properly deal with a student who's being defiant.
And if that doesn't show it.
Well, no, it certainly does not. They clearly failed this. And you know, there's one part where they are carrying him down the hallway, where one has his feet and one has him underneath the arms. And I saw that and I was like, okay, I don't know what just happened before, but there are times when we have to pick somebody. We shouldn't in school circumstances, but as moms, there are times when we pick somebody up to remove them from danger for themselves or other people. And I don't love the way they're carrying him because it could hurt him and it could hurt them.
Yeah.
But then but you go, I don't know what happened before. So like if it was a thing where he was in imminent danger for himself or somebody else, I don't know. But then you see them just, you know, dragging him with his face on the floor and you go, people, like that is a person.
Mm-hmm.
That is a little person with feelings and nerves on his face. And I just want to say, you know, this adds to all of our anxiety for back to school.
It does, when we see things like this.
Yes, it does. And I almost didn't want to cover it, but I think it is important because I think we need to hug our children every day and know the people that we're entrusting them to. And we need to look at our children when they come home every day.
Right.
You need to look and see,
talk
are
to
there
them.
Scrapes? Are there marks?
Mm-hmm.
And you need to not take it in stride.
Right.
Like look them up and down, hug them when they come home and tell them how much you love them, and look them up and down and make sure that they are all in one piece and watch their behavior. And if they start, you know, acting differently, you got to assume that something's going on. It may not be something like this, but it's something, and we have to take action.
Yeah, good point.
So, all right.
Okay, so that's for what we've got for input in the news, and we're going to be coming back with Vince Redmond.
Vince, yes.
Talking about
Who's been
back
waiting
to school
for us. We're late.
and anxiety.
All right, stick
about
with
that.
us. Bye-bye.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Hey, welcome back to Autism Live. We heard you. Everybody wants
macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, but we're gonna make it allergy free. But here's what's the crazy part of this macaroni and cheese. It's actually healthy.
And it tastes good.
Yeah, it tastes really good.
That's the most important part.
So we're gonna start. We got our water boiling. There's so many variations on the pasta. We're using today a corn pasta. We can verify with the manufacturer that we have a GMO-free product. So let's go ahead and put that in there.
Ooh,
and if you don't mind, stir that up for me, my friend.
Now it's sticking a little bit to the bottom.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
We maybe add a little more high heat oil and spread that around again. One thing you gotta know about gluten-free pasta, if you overcook this, it becomes mush. Let's move this guy over to the other burner so you can see what I'm doing. And now we're gonna start with the old macaroni and cheese sauce. What's great is there's a lot of choices for, you know, different soups. And the way that I look at soups, and again, please follow the recipe on your screen right now. I don't like to measure very often. But what I like to use is a creamy butternut squash soup. So this soup is great because it adds a lot of flavor to the dish, but also gives people another serving of vegetables. With kids, we don't want to over season. Maybe with the adults, we can season some for the kids first, pull it out, serve them, and then add a little more, you know, garlic powder or onion powder or other types of things into your dish. So the next most important thing on this recipe is we're gonna add in a thickener and the faux cheese. Now some people like their sauce really thick, so you just add in more cornstarch or more arrowroot, so that's not a big deal. How's that doing? You think it's ready?
I think it's done.
Okay, so why don't we switch? I'll take that, you do that.
Okay.
And I'm going to strain this bad boy here. Here, let me turn that off.
Okay.
Or we're going to cause trouble again.
Trouble in Lisa's kitchen.
No,
That's another show.
don't, yeah, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get this all strained. It's a good consistency. So I'm going to check to make sure our pasta is cooked. So really you just want to make sure, just like any pasta, it's a little bit squeezy, a little bit. Nice. Dude, good job. We're
Yay.
good.
Looks yummy.
So even though the cheese is not totally melted, it's okay, don't panic. What's important is that you're gonna love this recipe once you eat it. What I enjoy most about this recipe is that it smells good, but this stuff is amazing. So if you don't mind, I'm going to serve you some up, and you can maybe blow a little bit on it so you don't burn your mouth. Sorry, I'm once a mom, always a mom.
Just like we tell our kids.
I know, right?
Oh, but I can't wait. I'm excited.
So I'm going to give a shot of this too, but
Oh my gosh, that is so good.
this is the ultimate comfort food. So
Oh, it's so
isn't
good.
it good?
And I'm not just saying that. It is really good. It literally tastes like something our kids would really like. And that sweetness is really, really, really good.
So the bonus for us is that when we're serving this to our kids, they're actually getting a full serving of vegetables in this. So instead of just eating a bunch of carbs and worthless calories, you're actually getting some good stuff in this. And we'll be back next time. I hope you join us again here on Autism Live. We're really loving the feedback, and if you have additional feedback, here's how you get it to us. You can send it to us via email at autismlive@gmail.com. On Facebook, facebook.com/autismlive. And also there's thousands of recipes waiting for you to discover them with pictures and different things on the TACA website. So you can hit TACA on the web, tacanow.org, and we'll be back. Hopefully we'll get to do this again.
I had so much
Maybe
fun.
we'll have a little wine, but you got to join us next time. We'll look forward to seeing you then.
Bye guys. We're going to keep eating.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get.
And welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
I'm Shannon Penrod, and we have with us, joining us via Skype, and we apologize because we're a little bit late joining him, but we have Vince Redmond. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist. He's a regular here on the show. And Vince is not only a licensed marriage and family therapist, but he is also someone who worked for many years as an ABA therapist. So he understands the challenges that families are facing when you're doing that intensive behavioral intervention, and how stressful, that can make other things stressful, right? And the fact that other people don't get it makes it stressful. So anyway, welcome back to the show, Vince.
Hello, how is everyone?
We're thrilled
good
to have you.
We're good. We're a little bit nervous because it's back to school time, and that's our topic for today.
I was saying yesterday you could have bounced a quarter off my head because I was wound so tight. And I know that we're not the only ones.
No.
I'm seeing it all over my Autism Mommy Facebook friends. Everybody's like,
Well, we feel out of control because we feel like we
Yes.
don't have that control. That's
Yes.
where it's coming from.
So Vince, help us to help ourselves, because we were talking right before we came on air about the fact that, you said sometimes it's harder for the parents, and I said, in fact, I think that we're the ones who get stressed, and then our kids sense our stress, and then, as you said, feed off of it. So talk to us a little bit about what we can do to not feel as out of control as we feel.
Well, and I think part of it is what you guys are explaining now is just being aware of it, right? Being aware of the control, being aware that that's where our anxiety oftentimes comes from, is that inability to control all the moving parts the way we want them to be. In a sense, that's the way the kids feel too. They too feel a lot of anxiety. Not only the anxiety they feel from the parent, but they have anxiety too because they don't know what's going on. And our kids have a very difficult time being able to predict the future, being able to logically understand what the next step's going to be. So when things change in their environment, either it be school, classroom, teacher, peers, what have you, that becomes very anxiety producing for them, and that raises our anxiety, right? So it's a secular, or a circular type of phenomenon when it comes to our anxiety. So being aware of it, being aware of that, it has a lot to do with what we can control and what we cannot, is the first step. Now that we're available and we're aware of what is kind of driving that anxiety, then we can do things about it, right? We can focus our energies on the things we can control, and then find a place to displace some of our anxiousness and other energies on things that we can't control. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. You said the word angst in there, and I heard that because I think that's what I've been. So, for instance, I was saying before that I was watching a show about India and how they do the laundry by beating it on the rocks, and that I sat there and not that I want to beat laundry on rocks, but there was a part of me that was like, that kind of intense physical labor. Yeah. Maybe I need to go do something like that because all these feelings have to go somewhere, and I'd rather it go somewhere positive.
Right, and you can't deny it, right? I mean, it's not something that you can just pretend is not there, right? When we have angst, we have anxiety, there's an energy that we have that needs to be released, and sometimes we can do it healthy or we can do it unhealthy. And again, knowing where we can control or where we can concentrate our energy and our anxiety on things that we can make better, things that we can come up with resolutions. I want the parents to be involved. I want the parents to be collaborative with their teachers, with their school districts, with their ABA agencies, with their therapists. But then there's things that anxiety can't control, and those are things and that's times where we need to look at going for walks, being involved in other types of hobbies, maybe focusing on different jobs, different types of things around the house, whatever it may be, somewhere where we can focus that anxiety to, or really that energy. Where can that energy go that will be more successful? And oftentimes, as we've all felt and we've all experienced, it's hard to do that. So all that anxiety comes out, and oftentimes comes out in a way that might help, but then it might also hurt a situation.
Well, it does bring home. I was a much better house cleaner this weekend than I normally am because I was scrubbing everything.
You use that as an outlet for your
I hadn't
angst.
thought about it, but that does make sense to me.
Right.
I was like, no, it is time to, completely scrub everything in the world down. That kind of makes sense. And then for our kiddos who are feeling anxiety because maybe it's a new school or maybe it's a new teacher or those kinds of things, while we're feeling anxious, what can we do to help them and not show them that we're feeling anxious, Vince?
Right. Well, again, that is a key point right there, is trying to maintain your anxiety and not showing that anxiety with your children, right? When they're already going to be just naturally anxious with the new things coming up. But how to reduce some of their anxiety? The best thing that I can think of is priming them, right? Getting them ready for it, talking about the new school, maybe showing them the new classroom, talking about the new peers, maybe talking who's the teacher, give them time to process, give them time to understand what changes are coming, and then possibly exposing them to some of those changes prior to when it actually goes into effect. So when school actually starts, they've already been to the classroom, or they've already been to the new school, or they've already maybe even met the teacher if you went in a couple days early to meet the teacher. So when they go to school, there's a little bit of familiarity to it, and it's not all brand new.
Yeah. It kind of takes my breath away, all of it.
I know, it does. It just seems like you're adding more layers of responsibility, but these are important things to do.
Absolutely. And I think part of it, for me, I thought this was going to get easier. The older Jem got and the better he got, I thought this was going to be that much easier. But the truth is that the goalpost for me got moved further away. Right. So when he was in second grade, I absolutely did all the things that you just mentioned, Vince, that we met the teacher, we did all this stuff. But, he started high school, and I can't go in and be there and introduce him to the teacher. I just had to pull up to the gate and have him go on in. And you know what? He's fine. Let's be clear about that. He's dealing fine with all of it.
At least you recognize that.
Me.
But you recognize that.
Yeah, but that does mean yes, it does mean a smidge of good, I guess, to recognize.
Well, and to Nancy's point, she was saying, you had made a point of this is more added responsibility, which could actually, give you more anxiety or more angst. And I think of it just the opposite. I think that as the parent as well, when you get to know the lay of the land, you know where your child's going to go. You've met the teacher that the child's going to be with, and you've spoken with them. You've kind of given them a little rundown. I would hope that your anxieties or all the parents' anxieties would be a little bit less, because now they've prepared the environment as best they can, right? There's obviously a lot of things that we have no control over, but making sure that we the kid, the family, everybody has seen the environment, talked to the environment, interacted, engaged in the environment prior to it going into effect, hopefully will lower the anxiety for the whole family.
And Vince, we just had somebody write in and say, I have 3 children on the spectrum, all 3 get anxiety, and I am well aware that if I show any signs of anxiety myself, it in turn amplifies theirs.
Wow.
Right.
Kudos to you with 3 children on the spectrum and
Yes.
dealing with all of the anxiety that goes with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why talking about those anxious situations or those triggers that cause the anxiety with the kids is good. It normalizes it. It's not taboo. It's not something that needs to be kept quiet or kept away. We're talking about what makes them anxious. It could be a new environment, it could be new people, it could be sounds, it could be just the typical anxiety that we all feel. They just don't know how to express it.
So you're saying address it and talk to them about it rather than redirect. Like when my son says, I'm nervous about going back to school. It's too hard for me.
Mm-hmm. Right. To talk about it. And again, each family and child are at different levels. And we have to be careful of, perseverating and doing, things for negative attention. So, it's not as easy, I can't say specifically what is going to work for everyone. However, in general, when you're talking about anxiety, you tend to have less anxiety after you have some exposure to it, right? So if we're talking about it and we find out that, let's say that why it's anxious because he doesn't know who the teachers are going to be. Okay. That's understandable. It makes sense, but we have to get to what actually is making him anxious, not just, well, I'm not going.
And I think it's the same litmus test for the rest of us. I'm somebody who has a great deal of anxiety, and I will be at home sometimes and I will say to my husband, I'm feeling very anxious right now. And my husband will say, well, why? Why are you feeling anxious? And I say, well, I don't know. And it's this and it's that. And I kind of, verbalize whatever. And then if I 10 minutes later said to him, I'm feeling very anxious right now, he would say, but you said that a few minutes ago. Is it still the same as it was before? And this actually happens, because then I will say again, I'm feeling really anxious, and then my husband knows not to respond when I'm saying it the third time.
Right.
He doesn't attend to it because it's me cycling.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with our kids. The first time they bring it up, I think we owe it to ourselves and to them to have the conversation. But then if it's just a thing that we're on the habit trail of it, and anxiety is like that sometimes, it's just I'm throwing it out there, but they don't respond.
Right, and that's when going to Nancy, that's when it's redirected to something else.
Yeah. My husband will try to distract me.
When they start to fixate on it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, because that doesn't, I can tell you it doesn't help me.
Right. That's the time to get engaged in another task. That's the time to get engaged in another conversation or something like that, so that the child has the interaction, but they have a place, like we were saying for the adults, to displace some of that energy doing something else.
Absolutely. So
now, we also wanted to talk about getting out of our kids' ways.
Yes. Because I think this goes a little bit hand in hand with it too. We have anxiety, and we feel as moms that we want to protect our kids. And, it's funny, I already wanted to talk about this, but there have been so many instances this week where it's come up. One of the criticisms for the show, Atypical, from one of our moms that I love, she said, I don't really relate to this mom because she doesn't want her son to date. And if my sons wanted to date, I would be,
right.
Why would you want to prevent that?
Right.
And I wrote back to her and I said, oh gosh, because I every day have to make a conscious effort to get out of my kid's way because I want to protect him from all the things that could possibly go wrong and hurt him. Oh my gosh. And this mom says, if he dates, do you realize what can happen? Somebody's going to break his heart. And we see this all the time. I think parents, I know I do it, and I know other parents that do this as well, that we get anxious about our kids, and then we actually do something to prevent something good happening.
We underestimate them.
Right.
Or we overestimate the rest of the world.
Right. And we can't see how they're going to respond, or we're not going to know how, strong or capable they may be if we continue to. And again, this is various different levels, and I know, various different, levels of children. But oftentimes you're right in that we don't clearly know what their capabilities are, or what they're able to endure if we don't let them endure it. And I as a supervisor, I had a very similar experience just this last couple of months, where a child that I was working with, had to be, we had to let him be rejected by his peers because he had, again, it was stepping aside and letting him go through that and processing and then working with him on how to problem solve, like what happened, what can you do differently, what are you in control of, and what should you do next, right? And it gave a really natural opportunity, which I was basically holding mom's hand through the whole process because we knew this was going to happen. But then how did he get stronger because of it? How did he take the emotional disappointment? And he actually did really well. He was disappointed, he was sad, but he came up with some good resolutions. He moved on with it. Great. It turned out to be a great learning experience for him. So as you said, sometimes we have to be prepared to catch them instead of stopping them from falling.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I go back to you saying, you got to be aware of it. Sometimes I'm not aware of it when I'm being overprotective. And over the years, I've had people that I've trusted that have called me out on it. Dr. Grant calls me out on it on a regular basis and says, Shannon, you have to let him do this. You have to let him do this. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have somebody like her sitting next to me doing that. How can we start to be more aware, Vince, on our own if we don't have somebody telling us?
And that's a great point. I think, for couples who are, for families that have, people that can look out for each other, it be spouses, it be siblings, it be, aunts, uncles, good friends, to be able to have those teams to where they do feel comfortable, like you said, where you do feel comfortable with someone saying, maybe that's too much, or maybe we need to let him go through this, right? Is to be able to have that confidant, confidant, be able to have that friend, be able to have that monitor that would be able to help through this, but being able to ask someone to monitor you, being able to reach out to someone and say, please keep an eye on this is a good step for all families.
Because I don't know a single parent out there that doesn't want the best for their child, right?
No,
I mean, isn't
of course not. That's what we all want.
That's where we all come from. But sometimes that gets confused with, because we want to protect them too. And so it gets really push me, pull you kind of thing. And I think it's really easy for us. I don't know. I know I do this all the time. I don't see you doing this as much, but do you see sometimes, are you ever so overprotective of him that you don't have him do something that would stretch him?
I think so. Yes, without a doubt. I see myself doing that on occasion.
It's hard. It's really, really hard. And I'm lucky because I'm at the point where Jem now recognizes it and says things to me and says, Mom, enough, you got to let me do this.
Right.
Not perfect, and we're not going to be able to be perfect in every situation. That's okay. Sometimes being protective is the right thing to do, and sometimes letting them do things or fall is the right thing to do. It's just being aware that we're letting that happen more than we did, say, 10 years ago.
Right, because it's a moving, it's not static.
No.
Every single day they change and they grow in their circumstances. And I gotta be honest with you, I thought that was all gonna end. What was I thinking?
That's what I think we're all guilty of. We think that it's going to end at a certain point, at a certain age.
Or that we're ever gonna stop worrying about them, or
Their parent. We're always gonna worry.
Yes.
Always.
And that's true for neurotypical parents too, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. They're no different.
No, it's no different. I mean, we're always going to worry. We're always going to be there for support. We're always going to worry and second guess their decisions, especially if that decision is different than our own. And being aware of that and knowing that, like you just said, that's a typical development from a parent-child relationship, that really eases my anxiety to know that this is normal, that feeling like this and having these worries isn't anything that I'm just experiencing. This is something that every parent experiences, when the kids get to that launching stage, when they do launch or they're in high school, we have these feelings of when do we let go, when do we not let go.
Yeah. And Vince, you know this though too. I'm sure I'm not the only parent who feels this way. In coming to autism, where, we sensed that something was going on with our kids and everybody told us, no, they're fine until we found out, oh yeah, they have an autism diagnosis. Your trust gets a little decimated, don't you think,
Yes,
Nancy?
because when you've had that feeling like, well, I knew something all along and nobody was being honest with me, then you feel like you're on guard, all the time.
And I certainly felt afterwards, I didn't trust anybody, and I still have issues with trust, but I also have trouble trusting myself because I thought that something was going on and people told me it wasn't, and I took their opinion because it seemed like the better one to have.
Right, so you feel betrayed by that.
And I feel betrayed by myself that I didn't listen to my gut.
I think that's so common with autism moms, that we second guess, shoulda, woulda, coulda, is the way we feel.
And we drag that into the future with us. And part of it, I think, what the problem is that I don't honestly know the answer of when to push him. I don't trust my instinct. If I trust somebody else, are they going to let me down? Because once upon a time I got, and that's why I say I'm lucky because I have somebody like Dr. Grant-Pichet to ask. But what do we do for the trust factor in ourselves and other people, Vince?
Learn from it. The biggest thing that just pops in my mind is learn from it, right? When we don't when we're putting all our trust into maybe someone that's giving us false information or something like that, we learn from that, right? We learn that our instincts about our children are maybe more, in fact, in tune than the others, right? But equally as important is when we have an intuition or we feel a certain way and we've been proven, positively proven wrong with that. I always remember this mom that had given up on her daughter and said, she just wants to be bathed, fed, and that's it. She wants nothing to do with me. I resent her. I'm done. My instincts are telling me this is hopeless. And then obviously through treatment and time, everything was different. Right. And there was a bond that was grown, right? But I think you're right that what you're saying is oftentimes we as a parent or as a mom, you guys are sensing things that are happening with our kids prior to any professional or anyone else actually saying what is going on. Now there's multitudes of reasons why that could be happening, but we learn from those experiences. We learn to either trust our instincts or to ask trusted professionals about what you're feeling. The biggest thing though that I can say is don't ignore it. Don't ignore our feelings and learn from our past experiences. Both of you had mentioned that you knew something was wrong with the boys and were told otherwise, right?
Yeah.
So found out that things were going, you were stronger with your emotion or your instincts. You were stronger with your intuition. Your intuition, you're going to believe now more because you were right.
So what I'm hearing there is that we need to start to sort out what are intuitions and what are our fears, and that we need to give ourselves a group of people around us, whether they're family members or experts that we trust and that can help us to sort that out.
Absolutely. That's a perfect summary. Absolutely.
All right.
Okay.
Well, Vince, always you help us sort these things out.
Yes, thank you. And we'll see how we survive the next couple of weeks as school gears up and we're sending our kids off, and we'll try to keep all these things in mind.
We do it every year.
Great advice.
We do it every year. And you would think
it would get easier.
Yeah. I mean, I really sincerely... And I think I'm building myself up to think, because Jem just started high school. And so I was like, this is the last big thing and it'll always be easier after this.
No,
and
this
you
year,
tell me it's more anxiety for you.
This year feels more difficult for me than last year. I don't. It just does.
Yeah.
It's just where I'm at.
Right. Well,
don't deny the anxiety. Anxiety is going to be there every year. And when we are aware of it and we can predict it, you don't want to have that, that subconscious belief that at some point, like we had mentioned, there's going to be no anxiety.
Right. I need to let go of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I need to let go of the idea that someday we're going to arrive at perfection.
No, we're never going to arrive at perfection. We're always going to we're human.
My sister always used to say, when you have a child, and it's not hers, she would quote somebody, you acknowledge that a piece of your heart is going to walk outside your body forever.
Right.
And that you have to come to grips with that.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Vince, for your advice, and we'll all try to keep it in mind as we suffer through and deal with the stressors of this next month.
Thank you so much.
Everyone would be okay.
Okay.
We will
It'll
be
all
okay.
be okay in the end.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's right.
Thank you, Vince.
Have a great week.
You
All right,
too.
you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's like that quote from the Marigold,
Marigold
Hotel that I always say.
You did.
Everything I love in that movie, they say everything will always be okay in the end. And so if it's not okay now, it's definitely not the end.
Right.
And that reminds me, okay, we're works in progress. I said that to Jem this morning to him. I said, because he was getting fatoots with me about something, and I said, you have to acknowledge that I'm a work in progress, Jem.
Right.
And he was like, what does that mean? And we had a whole discussion about that. But I think it's important for our kids to see us as human beings.
Yes.
I love that Vince was saying, to talk about the anxiety. I did the other day because of where Jem is. I wasn't able to hide it. I was trying really hard, and I wasn't able to hide it. And at some point, he said something, and I said, I just need for you to understand that you're fine and that you're going to be fine. And I have no doubts whatsoever that high school is going to be great for you. But you know me, and I'm an anxiety ball, and there's a certain amount of stuff that I have to work through that has to do with me and not to do with you.
And he understood that.
And as soon as I said that, he was like, great, you just have that over there, Mom, and
Right.
I'm not paying attention to it.
Right.
Which, but he just spent 21 days in a car with me driving all over the world. So, he's very used to me and my mashugana.
Right.
So you really want to get to know your kid and have them get to know you, go on a 21-day car trip, and you'll find that you'll all have it all figured out.